Is there any legislation before Congress now that you favor?
There have been measures recently put in. One is to prohibit the Park Service, U.S. Park Service, from banning people from carrying guns in those facilities where the state law would otherwise not be in conflict. So there are a number of, well, for instance, there were a couple of scientists doing research in a park on the southern border with Mexico, and they had to abandon their research because it was so dangerous on the border with the coyotes and the drug types coming across armed and dangerous. And when they asked for the ability to protect themselves, they were told, no, you can't. You can't take a gun into that park. And so they gave up and they left their research. So we want to tell the Park Service, bad idea, you can't do it anymore. We're hoping that very shortly there will be legislation introduced to repeal the Veterans Disarmament Act, and that, I think, might have some chance, because once it's been introduced as a repeal measure, first of all, we'll get a little accountability by seeing who signs on as a co-sponsor. There were never any votes at all when the ban went through, when the Veterans Disarmament Act was put through the Congress. It passed by unanimous consent every time in every body. This way we would get those willing to co-sponsor the legislation. And even in the House, there is at least one opportunity for a recorded vote. And I think if we get it to that point and the sponsor were willing to push it for a recorded vote, that it would pass. Because I don't think even many Democrats who have said they're against the war but for the troops, they're not about ready to say, but I don't think any soldier should have a gun when he gets back home.
Do you have any idea how many of the numbers in the military are being affected by this?
At present, 140,000 veterans have been disarmed, and it's increasing at the rate of 1,000 a month. And the debate, as the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Veterans Administration, Mike McClendon, told us, the debate in the Veterans Administration is whether or not all veterans should be classified as having PTSD. So this is potentially huge.
Yes. You think the overt antagonism of the media has mellowed some?
The media may be somewhat mellower in dealing with gun ownership, but primarily it simply tries to ignore the issue altogether. It hardly had anything to report on the Veterans Disarmament Act because you had the NRA agreeing with it and the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence agreeing with it. Hey, where's the controversy? The media likes to either report some crime scene where if it bleeds, it leads, or some controversy, some scandal, and the passage of this legislation, other than our opposition, was really rather boring. And so it got no coverage. And they were perfectly happy to let it go through the Congress that way. It was in their interest because it was advancing an agenda they agreed with. But probably the best thing we have going for us to get the media to deal somewhat more fairly is the fact that the old media is losing market share. They're losing money. They're letting people go. And we can find our information on the internet rather more easily than going outside on a snowy morning and picking up the newspaper. And so the media is belatedly beginning to realize this, and you're seeing print media offering themselves online, oftentimes for free, except for archives, because they're looking for some way to keep before their old readers. Their old readers are not going out to pick up the paper anymore. I don't get the Washington Post in Washington, near where I live. If I need to see the Washington Post, I can go online. Why should I pay Pravda to tell me a bunch of lies?
Okay, you're up against somebody who's anti-gun, and you'd like to have him change his position. What's the single best argument to use?
Well, one argument that I think does kind of silence the critic is one that I've heard you use, and that is, oh, so guns are really bad. Well, then you want to put a sign on your house that says no guns in this house? You could offer to give them that sign for free, and I've yet to find anybody that would take the sign. We've made these as bumper stickers, and I still have the original stack that we had printed up, other than those that I gave out to a few people that thought it was funny. But nobody obviously is serious about putting up a sign like that on their house, because that's like putting up a "steal me." The other thing, you'll get somebody that says, well, I agree. They're sort of the agnostic of the debate. I agree that the Second Amendment means what it says, that individuals are protected in their individual right to keep and bear arms. I don't feel like I need a gun right now. So, oh, good. So you don't have homeowners insurance either, right? Okay. That usually makes the point. You hope your house is never going to burn down, but you still buy the insurance. This is something that's so typical of the liberal, whether they're looking at the world abroad or whether they're looking at a thug on the corner where they're walking down the street. Their argument is self-defense is too dangerous. You might hurt somebody else. Surely talking would be better. When did violence ever solve anything? Well, you could talk to the people of Sudan. There was a silent genocide, not Darfur, but the one in the south of Sudan, where some 2 million people were murdered, and it stopped when the Islamic government of the north realized, oh, somebody got guns to those people. They're killing us. And so they struck a deal, and at least as long as those people stay armed and willing to use their guns, then I think there's going to be a truce there in the southern Sudan. So talking did nothing for 20 years, but guns did something in 6 months. A friend of mine who's a missionary, who is South African, lives in Cape Town, was worshiping in a church on a Sunday night, and a large church, there were 1,000 people at a Sunday evening service. Terrorists came into the church and began shooting and hand grenading, and bodies and benches were flying in the air, and Charles van Veek got down behind a pew in the back of the church, because he sat there on purpose, just with this horrible thought in mind that maybe something like this, if it ever happened, that's where he wanted to be. Got down behind a pew, used it kind of as a bench rest, fired off a couple rounds, and that stopped the attack. One man, no special training, actually not even a very good gun. It was enough, because he had a plan and he had the means to carry out the plan. And these are the kinds of examples, I think, that we can keep pushing, that make the point that even though the media doesn't want to deal with it, we can just keep talking about it, because when we get into these debate situations, it's up to us to introduce this kind of information. And when we do, people get a chance to see, oh, there were some really bad situations where an armed citizen made a huge difference.